Quite a few campaigns come to mind when you consider some of the Republic's bloodiest battles. Umbara, Geonosis, and Jabim in particular all stand out. And interestingly, all three of those battles had something in common. In all of them, the Republic was fighting armies that were led by separatist militias native to the world in question. Republic tacticians dreaded these kinds of battles, and for good reason. In this video, we'll be exploring exactly what that reason was.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
At its height, the Galactic Republic encompassed 3 million inhabited star systems, and there were many more beyond its fringe that were inhabited as well. That's a tall order for any military force to defend on its own, even when the Republic military was at its greatest strength. As a result, nearly all of the millions of the civilizations that comprised the Republic had their own defense forces, ranging from small militias to fully armed small militaries, even when there was still a Republic military around to provide protection on a galactic scale. At the end of the new Sith Wars, the Republic military was dissolved and a new, much more decentralized system was put into place instead. As part of the wider scale Ruusan reformations, the Republic was divided up into 1,024 sectors, each of which had their own planetary sector force at their disposal. While the judicial forces remained in place as a galactic scale peacekeeping force, the Republic military was disbanded and its assets were distributed back to these PSFs, which became the dominant military forces in the galaxy. Each planetary security force patrolled a whole sector and featured everything you'd expect a military to have, ranging from ground troops to a fleet of warships. The size and strengths of the PSFs were strictly limited by the Ruusan reformations, especially the size and firepower of warships, a measure that was intended to prevent arms races or incentivization of conflict. In the immediate aftermath of the new Sith Wars, most PSFs were very similar in terms of equipment, as almost all of them had inherited gear from the Republic military. However, this changed rather quickly. Aside from limitations, Republic law granted the planetary security forces a lot of flexibility, especially in terms of internal structure, what equipment they used, and the strength and disposition of their assets. This had a wide range of consequences. For one thing, common equipment standards were quickly lost, with each PSF adopting its own uniform styles, standard weapons kits, starfighters, and warships. This, of course, led to a great disparity in military quality between the wealthier parts of the galaxy and the frontier. In the core, PSFs operated with top-of-the-line equipment, often pushing the limits of the Ruusan reformations. While on the rim, PSFs were frequently forced to use outdated equipment. Indeed, by the time of the Separatist Crisis, many Outer Rim PSFs still used Aurek-class strike fighters as their primary starfighter model, despite it having been obsolete for hundreds of years by that point. But while the most well-known consequence of this decentralization was the decline of the Rim PSFs, there were other consequences as well. Some planetary security forces became incredibly proficient military units, developing their own mini-cultures and creating their own technology. Some of these forces worked with the judicials in other sectors during times of crisis, like the Antarian Rangers. Others, like the Umbaran military, became insular and secretive, guarding their technological advances fiercely from prying eyes. The planetary security forces, in the wider scheme of things, fought much of the Clone Wars. When sectors began seceding from the Republic to join the CIS, their PSFs seceded with them, creating the early foundations of the CIS military. When the Clone Wars broke out and the Republic military was officially re-established, the Loyalist PSFs gradually began to be nationalized, though it took until the Outer Rim sieges for all Loyalist PSFs to be fully integrated into the new Republic military. Some PSFs in divided sectors split, and there were multiple battles fought over the course of the Clone Wars between armies that, just a few years earlier, had been one and the same. During the Clone Wars, PSFs did a lot of the grunt work for both sides. At any given point during the conflict, there were 100 battles active on fronts across the galaxy. The Confederacy of Independent Systems, after all, didn't have a nice, clean border with the Republic. It was composed of dozens of pockets of separatist worlds, and as a result, battle lines during the Clone Wars were a textbook case of border gore. All of these constantly shifting, incredibly complex borders were active fronts for most of the conflict, along with skirmishes, which were simply a daily fact of life, and full battles were also rather common. Most of these battles and skirmishes were fought primarily, if not entirely, by local forces, who were tasked with either holding the line or making small advances across the border. Larger military maneuvers, like almost all of the ones we see in the Clone Wars media, were usually performed by the central military forces of the Republic or the Confederacy, but oftentimes local forces were involved too. The Republic in particular liked to make use of them, as the Grand Army of the Republic struggled with numbers right up until the end of the war, and local militias were an easy way to help with this. On Harun Kal, Giju, Onderon, and hundreds of other worlds, the Republic developed a strategy they called the militia model. They would send small forces of clones to contested worlds, where the clones would train local loyalist fighters who would then capture the planet for the Republic. This strategy proved to be quite effective, especially in the war's early stages. But two could play at that game, and the strategy was even more effective for the Confederacy. When fighting defensively, the CIS often relied on local forces to win the day, which was honestly a smart move, as it always cost the Republic greatly in lives. Large, well-armed local forces were a nightmare for Republic tacticians to deal with, especially since advanced intelligence about the size, strength, and disposition of such forces was often unreliable. For one thing, homegrown forces knew the terrain better than any recon droid, giving them massive advantages when fighting defensively against foreign forces. They knew the planet's flora, fauna, and landscape by nature, while invaders had to learn all of that and learn it fast. Oftentimes, they knew things about their homeworlds that their invaders didn't, and when such cases arose, they were often used as traps to slow down invading armies. Oftentimes, local forces had technology that was specialized to the environments in which they fought. The Geonosians, for example, used sonic weaponry, which was designed to allow them to fight in tunnels without risking collapses, a luxury that the Republic's clones didn't have, which is why the Republic was never able to truly capture the Geonosian catacombs even after winning 2 battles on the planet. On Jabim, Alto Stratus's nationalists were equipped with rocket boots that allowed them to glide over the planet's muddy surface, enabling them to easily outmaneuver Republic forces at every turn. On Umbara, the Umbaran separatists simply had better technology in general, which the Republic knew little about and had no counter to. But perhaps the biggest and most important advantage of separatist militias was that standard Republic battle tactics weren't designed for use against them. The Republic army was trained to fight the CIS's droid army, and their tactics and equipment often reflected this. Their gear loadouts were designed to deal with droids and the types of droid vehicles often deployed by the CIS, which included things like EMP weapons that were of much less use against organics, especially when those organics had their own battle gear that differed wildly from the CIS loadout. Tactically, the Republic's disadvantage was even worse. The Confederacy had a very well-defined tactical model, and the Republic's tactical model was designed to counter it. Clones were taught primarily to expect mass charges, overwhelming firepower, and little strategic nuance, which the Confederate droid army primarily relied on. But when fighting local forces, they often faced the opposite. Nearly all local militias preferred guerrilla tactics, which clones weren't trained as well for, and which their battle strategies were incredibly vulnerable against. Some separatist militias had the cunning to combine all of these advantages to devastating effect. Consider the following clip from the Battle of Umbara. Here, we see the Umbarans make use of almost every advantage we mentioned earlier. Their knowledge of their homeworld allowed them to outmaneuver Republic forces and get behind their lines, setting them up for an ambush. They used technology wholly alien to the clones, in this case a type of centipede-like droid, to open their attack in a way that would cause mass confusion. This, in particular, was successful, as the clones clearly had no idea what to do about the droid and turned their backs on the attacking Umbarans to waste blaster gas shooting at it. The Republic had no counter for such technology, and their battle strategies were clearly vulnerable to the type of ambush that the Umbarans performed expertly here. It took a carpet bombing to clear the Umbarans out. So that was why the Republic feared local separatist home armies. But what do you think? Are the home armies something you would have liked to have seen more in Star Wars The Clone Wars? I know I would have, because the Onderon arc was pretty cool, and seeing those home militias fight against the separatists, or vice versa, would be a pretty interesting dynamic to the Clone Wars. So make sure you let me know which home army you'd like to see in Season 7, if there are going to be any. Anyways guys, make sure you check out the description below where there's a bunch of needy links waiting for your clicks. So we've got our Geetsly's Gaming Network where you can join us on our Gmod and Roblox, and we also have our main Discord server where you can chat with other Star Wars fans, and a history channel as well where you can learn all the niche and unknown facts about World War II. I don't know about you, but Star Wars and history sounds like a pretty good combination. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.